The chain snapped with a metallic shriek that split the afternoon air like a gunshot. 7-year-old Noah Bennett tumbled from his therapy swing, his small body hitting the mulch with a dull thud that seemed to echo through the quiet neighborhood park. His hands immediately began their familiar dance, flapping against his sides in rapid succession as he tried to process the sudden sensory overload, the unexpected fall, the harsh voices shouting above him. "I told you to get off that thing." Officer Marcus Webb's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. His partner, Officer Janet Cross, stood beside him with her arms crossed, the late afternoon sun glinting off her badge as she surveyed the scene with satisfaction. Neither officer moved to help the child who now sat in the wood chips, rocking back and forth as tears streamed down his face. From her position on the nearby bench, Dr. Leah Bennett closed her book with deliberate care, marking her place with a bookmark before setting it aside. She had been watching this confrontation unfold for the past 10 minutes, her training in behavioral analysis allowing her to read the situation with crystalline clarity. Her son needed his swing, needed the sensory input it provided to regulate his nervous system. The medical documentation in her briefcase supported this need, as did the letter from his occupational therapist that she kept folded in her wallet. Noah's stimming intensified, his small hands flapping faster as he tried to self-soothe. The texture of the mulch against his palms, the scattered light filtering through the oak leaves above, the lingering scent of someone's barbecue from a distant backyard. All of it overwhelmed his developing sensory system. His mother rose from the bench with fluid grace, her movements controlled and purposeful. "Excuse me, officers," Leah said, her voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that comes from years of commanding rooms full of federal agents. "That swing is medically prescribed equipment for my son's autism therapy. I have documentation from his physician and occupational therapist." Officer Webb turned toward her, his jaw set in a hard line. He was a man in his early 40s, with graying temples and the kind of permanently skeptical expression that suggested he'd heard every excuse in the book. "Ma'am, that unauthorized equipment attracts vagrants and drug users. We've had complaints from the Homeowners Association about inappropriate gatherings around these makeshift installations." The HOA. Leah suppressed a bitter smile. Pine Ridge Estates had always prided itself on maintaining property values through strict adherence to community standards. Manicured lawns, approved paint colors, regulation mailboxes, and, apparently, no tolerance for medical equipment that didn't fit their aesthetic vision. She knelt beside Noah, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder to provide the deep pressure he found calming. The swing was installed with proper hardware and safety considerations. She continued, her voice remaining level despite the frustration building in her chest. "My son has a documented medical need for sensory input. This equipment helps him regulate his nervous system and prevent meltdowns." Officer Cross stepped closer, her hand resting meaningfully on her citation book. She was younger than her partner, with sharp features and an aggressive posture that suggested she had something to prove. "Medical need or not, you don't have permission to modify public playground equipment. The HOA board specifically voted against therapeutic installations last month." The words hit Leah like a physical blow. She hadn't been informed of any such vote, hadn't been given the opportunity to present Noah's case or educate the board about his needs. Her son continued to rock beside her, his breathing gradually slowing as her presence provided the stability he craved. She watched the officers pull out a knife to cut the remaining rope from the swing's attachment point, destroying weeks of careful preparation and her son's primary coping mechanism. "You're destroying medical equipment," she said, her voice taking on an edge that would have been immediately recognizable to her subordinates at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. "This is discrimination against a disabled child." Webb's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "Discrimination, lady. We're enforcing community standards. If every parent started hanging whatever they wanted from these trees, we'd have a circus instead of a neighborhood park." He gestured broadly at the modest playground equipment, the carefully maintained grass, the neat flower beds that surrounded the recreation area. "Your kid can play on the regular swings like everyone else." Leah felt Noah's tension spike at the raised voice, his stimming becoming more pronounced as he processed the conflict around him. Regular playground swings provided entirely different sensory input. She wanted to explain. The deep pressure and predictable motion of his therapy swing helped organize his nervous system in ways that traditional equipment simply couldn't match. But she could see that these officers had already made up their minds, had already decided that her son's needs were somehow less valid than community aesthetics. "I'm issuing you a citation for unauthorized installation of playground equipment," Cross announced, pulling out her citation book with obvious relish. "That's a $200 fine, and you'll be responsible for any damage to city property." The pen scratched across the carbon paper as she filled out the ticket, each stroke deliberate and punitive. Leah accepted the citation with steady hands, noting the officer's badge numbers and the exact time of the incident. Her photographic memory, honed through years of analyzing behavioral patterns and criminal psychology, cataloged every detail of the interaction. The way Webb's left eye twitched when he lied about complaints from the HOA. The tension in Cross's shoulders that suggested she was following orders rather than her own judgment. The casual cruelty with which they destroyed a child's coping mechanism. Furthermore, Webb continued, clearly enjoying his position of authority, "if we find any more unauthorized modifications to public property, we'll be forced to contact Child Protective Services about unsafe supervision of a special needs child." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a wildfire, acrid and suffocating. Leah felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest, a familiar sensation she recognized from her darkest cases, when she was forced to confront the absolute worst of human nature. These officers were threatening to separate her from her son, to weaponize his disability against both of them, simply because she dared to provide him with the tools he needed to navigate a world that rarely accommodated his differences. Noah looked up at his mother with wide, trusting eyes, unaware of the bureaucratic violence being perpetrated against him. His stimming had settled into a gentle rhythm, his small hands patting his thighs in a pattern that helped him process the overwhelming stimuli of the afternoon. Leah smoothed his dark hair, marveling at his resilience, at his ability to find comfort in the midst of chaos. "I understand your position, officers," she said finally, her voice carrying undertones that a more perceptive person might have recognized as dangerous. "I'll be sure to address this matter through appropriate channels." Webb nodded with satisfaction, clearly interpreting her measured response as capitulation. "Smart choice. Ma'am, we're just doing our jobs, keeping the community safe and orderly." He gestured to his partner, and they began walking back toward their patrol car, their duty apparently complete. As the officers drove away, Leah gathered the cut ropes from Noah's destroyed swing, coiling them carefully in her hands. The hardware was still intact, she noted, still perfectly functional despite the officer's sabotage. Noah stood beside her, his movements calmer now that the source of conflict had departed, though she could see the confusion in his expression as he processed what had just occurred. "Mama, why did they break my swing?" he asked, his voice carrying the particular cadence that marked his autism, each word carefully considered and precisely pronounced. Leah knelt to meet his eyes, choosing her words with the same care she used when briefing federal agents before a high-stakes operation. "Some people don't understand that everyone has different needs, sweetheart, but we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again." That evening, after Noah had settled into his bedtime routine with his weighted blanket and white noise machine, Leah opened her briefcase in the privacy of her home office. The citation lay on her desk, beside her FBI credentials, a stark contrast between local authority and federal power. She pulled out her secure phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Agent Rodriguez, this is Director Bennett. I need you to activate the Pine Ridge surveillance protocol immediately." Special Agent Maria Rodriguez had worked under Leah's command for 6 years, specializing in behavioral analysis and community safety initiatives. "Director, the drone surveillance system has been running over the HOA properties for 3 weeks as part of our anti-bullying analytics pilot program. We've got comprehensive coverage of all public spaces, including the playground where the incident occurred this afternoon." Leah felt a grim smile tug at the corners of her mouth. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit had been testing new surveillance technologies designed to identify and prevent community-based harassment and discrimination. Pine Ridge Estates, with its history of complaints about diversity and inclusion issues, had been selected as a test location. The irony was not lost on her that her own son had become a victim of the very behaviors they were studying. "Pull the footage from this afternoon. Maria, I want a complete analysis of the officers' behavior, their statements, and their destruction of medical equipment. Cross-reference their claims about HOA complaints with actual board meeting minutes." "Already on it. Director, I've also been monitoring social media chatter from the neighborhood. There's significant discussion about the HOA's recent policy changes, particularly regarding therapeutic accommodations for disabled residents. It appears there was never actually a formal vote against these installations." The web of deception was beginning to unravel, each thread revealing more about the systematic discrimination that Noah had faced. Leah opened her laptop and began reviewing the behavioral profiles that her team had compiled on key HOA board members. Karen Smithfield, the HOA president, emerged as a particularly interesting subject. Her social media posts revealed a pattern of complaints about property values being threatened by non-traditional residents. Over the following days, Leah maintained her usual routine, taking Noah to the park each afternoon, despite the absence of his swing. She sat on the same bench, reading the same book, while her son adapted to the loss of his primary coping mechanism with the heartbreaking resilience that marked so many children on the autism spectrum. Other parents began to notice the change, asking gentle questions about the missing equipment. "They said it was attracting the wrong kind of people," explained Sandra Martinez, another parent whose daughter sometimes played alongside Noah. "But I never saw anyone inappropriate using it. Just your son. And he was always so careful with it." The neighborhood gossip revealed the true motivation behind the officers' actions. Several parents reported receiving notices from the HOA about maintaining property values and community standards. The language was carefully coded, but the message was clear. Certain types of people and accommodations were not welcome in Pine Ridge Estates. Meanwhile, Leah's team worked with methodical precision to build their case. The drone footage provided crystal clear evidence of the officers' aggressive behavior toward Noah, their destruction of medical equipment, and their false statements about HOA policy. Financial records revealed that both officers had received payments from a private security firm contracted by Karen Smithfield to enhance community safety protocols. The monthly HOA movie night was scheduled for the following Friday, a community event held in the park's amphitheater, where families gathered to watch films projected on a large outdoor screen. Leah had attended these events with Noah in the past, appreciating the sensory-friendly environment and the opportunity for him to socialize with other children in a structured setting. This month's feature was a family-friendly adventure film, and she made sure to arrive early with Noah to secure their usual spot near the back. Karen Smithfield stood at the front of the gathering, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the early evening light as she welcomed the assembled families. She was a woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having her authority questioned. Her smile was warm and inclusive as she spoke about community values and neighborhood pride. "Before we begin tonight's entertainment," she announced, her voice carrying easily across the amphitheater, "I want to remind everyone about our recent policy updates regarding playground equipment and community standards. These measures are designed to maintain the safety and property values that make Pine Ridge Estates such a desirable place to live." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, though Leah noticed several parents exchanging uncomfortable glances. Noah sat beside her, wearing his noise-canceling headphones and fidgeting with a small sensory toy that helped him manage the stimulation of being in a large group. His absence of his therapy swing had made these community events more challenging for him, but he was adapting with the remarkable flexibility that she'd always admired in him. As Karen prepared to start the movie, Leah's phone buzzed with a text message from Agent Rodriguez. "Teams in position. We have warrants for Webb and Cross. Ready for your signal." Leah stood from her blanket, her movement drawing attention from the families around her. She walked toward the front of the amphitheater with calm deliberation, her FBI credentials visible in her hand. The crowd grew quiet as she approached the projection area, where Karen Smithfield watched her with growing confusion and irritation. "I'm sorry to interrupt your evening," Leah announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention in crisis situations. "But I believe this community needs to see something important before we proceed with tonight's entertainment." She connected her laptop to the projection system, replacing the movie's opening credits with the FBI's behavioral analysis logo. Karen stepped forward, her face flushed with indignation. "Excuse me, but you can't just hijack our community event. Who do you think you are?" "I'm Dr. Leah Bennett, Director of the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit," she replied, her voice steady and professional. "And I'm also Noah's mother." The crowd stirred with interest and confusion. Several people recognized Noah from the playground, while others whispered questions about what was happening. Leah clicked to the first slide of her presentation, which showed an aerial view of the park with timestamp data from 3 days earlier. "For the past month, my unit has been conducting a pilot program studying community-based discrimination and harassment using advanced surveillance technology. Our goal was to identify patterns of behavior that target vulnerable populations, particularly disabled individuals and their families." The next slide showed a close-up of Noah's therapy swing, capturing the careful construction and safety measures that Leah had implemented. Medical documentation appeared alongside the image, clearly establishing the therapeutic necessity of the equipment. "This swing was prescribed by my son's occupational therapist as part of his autism treatment plan. It was installed with proper hardware and safety considerations, and it posed no threat to community safety or property values." Karen's face had gone pale, but she maintained her defensive posture. "The HOA board voted against these installations. We have policies against unauthorized modifications to public property." "Actually, you don't." Leah advanced to the next slide, which showed minutes from recent HOA board meetings. "Our investigation found no record of any formal vote regarding therapeutic accommodations. In fact, your own bylaws specifically require reasonable accommodation for disabled residents under federal law." The crowd began to murmur more loudly as the implications became clear. Parents who had questioned the swing's removal now understood that they had been lied to, that a child's medical needs had been sacrificed for the sake of appearances and property values. Leah clicked to the next slide, which began playing video footage from the afternoon of the incident. The crowd watched in shocked silence as Officers Webb and Cross approached Noah's swing, their body language aggressive and intimidating even before they began speaking. The audio was crystal clear. capturing every word of their interaction with devastating precision. The footage showed Noah stimming peacefully on his swing, his movements gentle and self-regulating. Before the officer's arrival disrupted his calm, it captured the moment they cut the ropes, the sound of the chains snapping, and Noah's terrified tumble into the mulch, most damning of all. It recorded their threats against both Noah and Leah, their casual cruelty toward a disabled child, and their lies about HOA policy. Several parents in the audience gasped audibly as they watched Noah fall, their protective instincts triggered by the sight of a vulnerable child being harmed by those sworn to protect him. Others turned angry eyes toward Karen, clearly connecting her role in orchestrating this discrimination. Furthermore, Leah continued, advancing to financial records. Our investigation revealed that both officers received unauthorized payments from a private security firm hired by HOA leadership to enhance enforcement of community standards. These payments constitute bribery and corruption of public officials. The final slide showed federal warrants for the arrest of Officers Webb and Cross on charges including civil rights violations, destruction of medical equipment, child endangerment, and conspiracy to deprive rights under color of law. As if summoned by the presentation, FBI agents appeared at the edges of the amphitheater, their presence professional but unmistakably authoritative. Agent Rodriguez approached the projection area, her badge clearly visible as she addressed the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, we're executing federal warrants tonight. Officers Webb and Cross will be taken into custody on civil rights charges related to their treatment of Noah Bennett and other community members. The two officers, who had been sitting in the back of the amphitheater in civilian clothes, suddenly found themselves surrounded by federal agents. Their faces showed a mixture of shock and disbelief as handcuffs were applied, and their rights were read aloud for the entire community to hear. Karen Smithfield stood frozen at the front of the crowd, her carefully constructed authority crumbling as the full scope of her liability became clear. Her unauthorized use of HOA funds to hire private security, her systematic discrimination against disabled residents, and her role in orchestrating the harassment of Noah and his family would all face federal scrutiny. Ms. Smithfield, Agent Rodriguez continued, producing another set of documents. You're also named in these warrants for conspiracy to violate civil rights and misuse of community funds. You have the right to remain silent. As the arrests proceeded, Leah returned to her son, who had watched the entire presentation with remarkable composure. His noise-canceling headphones had protected him from the worst of the crowd's reactions, and his mother's calm presence provided the stability he needed to process these dramatic changes. "Mama," he said quietly, "are they going to give me my swing back?" She knelt beside him, smoothing his hair with gentle fingers. "Yes, sweetheart. And we're going to make sure that no other children have to go through what you experienced." In the weeks that followed, the transformation of Pine Ridge Estates was remarkable. The HOA, under new leadership and federal oversight, voted unanimously to establish a comprehensive disability accommodation fund. The playground was redesigned with input from occupational therapists and autism specialists, creating a space that welcomed children with diverse sensory needs. Noah's new swing was installed with ceremony and celebration, surrounded by other therapeutic equipment that served the community's growing population of children with special needs. The space was officially dedicated as Noah's Nest, recognizing his unwitting role in bringing positive change to the neighborhood. Officers Webb and Cross faced federal hate crime charges, their law enforcement careers ending in disgrace as they awaited trial. Karen Smithfield's legal troubles extended beyond criminal charges to include civil lawsuits from multiple families who had faced discrimination under her leadership. The private security firm that had facilitated the harassment lost its license, and faced investigation by federal authorities. Most importantly, the community began hosting regular inclusion events, educational workshops about autism and other disabilities, and support groups for families navigating the challenges of raising children with special needs. What had begun as a story of cruelty and discrimination transformed into a model of community unity and understanding. On a warm afternoon, 3 months later, Leah sat on her familiar bench, watching Noah swing peacefully in his restored therapy equipment. Other children played nearby, some neurotypical and others with various disabilities, all welcomed and accommodated in the new inclusive playground design. Sandra Martinez approached with her daughter, both of them smiling as they prepared to join the afternoon play session. "I never thanked you properly for what you did," Sandra said, settling onto the bench beside Leah. "My daughter has been so much happier since the playground renovation. She never told me before how excluded she felt when other kids couldn't play with her because the equipment wasn't accessible." Leah watched her son's gentle movements on his swing, the rhythmic motion that helped organize his nervous system and brought peace to his overstimulated world. "Noah taught me that sometimes the most important battles are fought by the quietest warriors." He never asked for attention or special treatment. He just needed the world to make a little space for him. The late afternoon sun filtered through the oak leaves above them, casting dancing shadows across the mulch where Noah had once fallen. Now, children of all abilities played together in that same space, their laughter mixing with the gentle creak of swings and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The sound was beautiful, Leah thought, the music of a community that had learned to embrace its diversity rather than fear it. As they prepared to leave the park that evening, Noah carefully dismounted from his swing and walked over to his mother. His movements were calm and regulated, his sensory needs met by the therapeutic equipment that would never again be taken from him without cause. "Thank you for fixing it, Mama," he said, his voice carrying the particular precision that marked his autism. "Thank you for making sure everyone can play." Leah took his hand as they walked toward their car, her heart full of pride for her remarkable son and hope for the future they had helped create. Behind them, the playground equipment stood ready for another day of inclusive play, a testament to the power of quiet strength and the importance of making space for every child to thrive. The evening air carried the sounds of a neighborhood at peace with itself, families gathering for dinner, children calling goodnight to their friends, and the gentle creak of swings that would never again be cut down in the name of appearances. Noah's swing moved gently in the breeze, waiting for tomorrow's therapy session, a symbol of resilience, justice, and the beautiful possibilities that emerge when communities choose inclusion over exclusion. In her briefcase, Leah carried letters from families across the country who had heard about Noah's story and found hope for their own struggles with discrimination and exclusion. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit had expanded their community surveillance program to other locations, using the lessons learned in Pine Ridge Estates to protect vulnerable populations from harassment and civil rights violations. As they drove home through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, past houses where lights were beginning to come on in windows and families were settling in for the evening, Leah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment of peace. Her son's simple need for a therapeutic swing had exposed a web of discrimination and corruption. But it had also revealed the community's capacity for growth, understanding, and positive change. Noah sat quietly in his car seat, processing the sensory experiences of their afternoon at the park, his hands moving in gentle patterns as he integrated everything he had seen, heard, and felt. His mother watched him in the rearview mirror, marveling at his resilience and his ability to find joy in the simple pleasure of regulated motion and predictable routine. The story of what happened in Pine Ridge Estates spread far beyond their neighborhood, becoming a case study in civil rights enforcement and community transformation. But for Leah and Noah, the most important outcome was simpler and more personal: a swing that would always be there when he needed it, a community that understood his worth, and the knowledge that sometimes standing up for what's right can change the world, one playground at a time.